another edition of Tribulation Ready Survival. Today we're going to go into part 2 of our canning series. Today we're going to can a 10-pound chub of ground beef. And we've done this once before. And you'll be surprised how much you don't get out of a 10-pound chub of beef when it comes to putting it into canning jars. So join us today on our journey, and we'll take you step by step on our process of canning ground beef. So for today's canning of ground beef, we're going to need only a few things. We're going to need a jar lifter or two, a liner for the bottom of the pot that we're canning in. That's the rubber piece here. We have 2 flats. They're in the dishwasher currently, getting hot and clean. 2 flats of pint size mason jars. We have a wide mouth funnel and our 2 pots. We have 1 deep stock pot. We also have a smaller pot. This is going to be for browning the hamburger, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And this is where we're going to can.
I'm a germaphobe, so I wash this with soap and water before I'm even cutting into it because everybody touching it kind of grosses me out. But we're just going to cut it open and start taking it and putting it in our pot. As we cook this, we're not going to want to cook it all the way, because we have to process it in the cans for 3 hours, so it's going to finish cooking. So we have it in there. We get the eye turned on and get it started cooking. We're not going to let it, we're only going to cook it until it starts to form crumbles, and then we'll stop cooking it.
Okay, so we're stirring the hamburger. We're not quite close to it being ready to be canned yet. So we're looking at it being slightly brown and starting to get into crumbly texture there. And so we're still a few minutes off. 10 pounds takes a while. We'll be right back when we get finished to the place where we're ready to can it. Okay, so what she's doing right now is she has the funnel in there to keep the product off of the rim, keep it clean. What she's doing is she's going to fill it to the bottom of the rim there, the very bottom down here. She's going to gap it at about 1 inch so that it doesn't come up any higher. And we'll still have room for broth to come in behind that. And so we don't waste anything here. We're going to use all the broth, we're going to use all the meat, and we're going to fill as many jars as we possibly can. And so now that we've checked the head space for the top of the jar, we're going to clean the lids, not the lids, we're going to clean the top of the rim, outside rim of the jar with vinegar to make sure that the lid, when we put it on there, seals properly. This is how many jars we've got out of a 10-pound chub. How many is that? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pints. One thing I will tell you that I've noticed about canning is you can have a lot of product that you're going to can, but once you get it into a jar, you realize how much there really is not. So it always pays you back to have extra jars or extra product and have plenty of both. because you just never know exactly how far it's going to go.
And we're doing the pint jars because how much meat our family would eat for a meal. Like if we made, let's say, spaghetti or something, we're not going to need a ton of meat. So if you have a very large family, you may have to do the quart jars instead of the pint jars. And we're doing an inch headroom on the jars so that when they're getting processed, there's room for the lids to seal on there and our product isn't ruined.
And we canned everything that came off of the 10-pound chub. There will also be some of the grease and moisture that was inside there that still comes out during the cooking process. So even if there is some meat that is in your jar that is exposed as far as not being submerged in juice, that's just fine. As long as it's sealed tight in there, you're good to go.
I know we covered it in our pear video. I'm not sure we covered it in this video. Why we're doing the vinegar on the rims is we want to make sure there's no grease, there's no debris, so that the rubber seal,
There you go.
so the rubber seal will seal on top of our jar to preserve our meat. So after I get all of these on, then, if you remember, I'm only going to do the rings, oops, to finger tight. I don't want it any tighter than finger tight.
And the purpose for that is to hold the lid on and seal it, well, hold it while it's getting sealed, but when we're done with the canning process and everything is completely done the following day, we will take the ring off, and that will help us know whether or not that actually did seal. It's very possible that you could have one that doesn't seal, and if it doesn't seal, you won't know it until you take that ring off, and who knows, maybe a year or so later, you got a science project growing, and that's never a good thing.
Unless you're homeschooler.
So now that we're done with getting the rings on finger tight, we're going to clean our work area. It's always important to keep your work area clean. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our stock pot on the stove with a little bit of vinegar inside of it to help keep the minerals from forming on the inside. Now reminder, this is a 3-hour process for this set of cans. And 3 hours is a very long time to be boiling water. It's going to be a rolling boil for 3 hours. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a second pot sitting over on an eye over here with extra water in it so that when all that water starts boiling out, we can refill this pot without the temperature in the pot going down, so we'll have hot water going back in. So, as you can see, we have our bottom of the pot protector here. She's going to put the jars in a nice fashion, as many as she can fit in comfortably. And then we will fill it with water to about a ½ inch over the top of the jars.
And if we didn't say, the vinegar is for the hard water. So we don't start our timer and the processing of our timer for the 3-hour processing time until we have boiling water. It has to be a rolling boil. So just little bubbles coming out the bottom don't count. It has to be rolling boil. We've got to get our water above our cans. And the same thing we did with our pears. if we don't have enough, we put empty jars. Like our next batch, we're gonna have to do empty jars because we only have 4 more left.
And that empty jars is to keep the jars in here from falling over, right?
Yes. So our jars don't break and crash up. I think I can actually get another jar in here.
Okay.
So I'm gonna do that real quick.
We're gonna see if we can fit one in there. We might be able to. Oh yeah, look at that, baby.
All right.
And notice that we have one over here that's starting to float. Well, that's an easy thing to fix because
we put this in there.
Right over
and
the
it
top.
holds it down. So now we're going to have our stove on. If you have a stove that the eye's not broke, our eye's broke. If our eye wasn't broke, I would have already been boiling water and put it in the boiling water. So because we don't have that, that's why we're doing it this way. You can do it either way, whatever works for your household. So when it starts boiling, then we start our 3-hour processing time.
Okay, check it out. That's what we're talking about. That's a nice little rolling boil there. So now we're going to start our timer for 3 hours. That will have this done at about 7 p.m. We'll set our timer. And there we go. 3 hours and counting. One of my favorite times during the time that we're canning is the time where everything's cooking. We don't have to do anything except drink coffee and make stupid jokes. Okay, it is the following morning. It's been about 12 hours. And so everything has cooled off and we've uncovered it and labeled it. You'll notice that the meat, and this will be true with the chicken too, or whatever kind of meat you can, may have a little bit of a red tinge. That is just due to the hemoglobin, we were told by one of our friends who does this a lot. And it's perfectly good to eat if you want to, and store. And if you want to cook it a little bit more before you consume it a year or so down the road, that's just fine. The meat is good. It's preserved. It's not going to be. It's not. There's nothing wrong with it. Let's put it that way. There's nothing wrong with this meat. You can brown it a little bit more if that's to your liking. It has totally cooked. And it was about 200 degrees for 3 hours in the canning process. So it's completely cooked. If you want to think of it this way, when you smoke meat, you're cooking it for a long period of time over a low heat, so about 170 to 200 degrees also. And oftentimes your meat has pink in it, and not because it's not cooked, but it just doesn't get to high enough temperature to turn it brown. In this case, since we've cooked the hamburger, we actually browned it to the point where it was crumbly. This will be good to make into taco meat or stews or soups or whatever you want to do. This hamburger is going to be ready to go in a couple of years when we're ready to eat it. Another thing that you might notice is on our second batch, the second part of our batch there, we had some ballast jars, or whatever you want to call them, extra jars that were empty. Well, we ended up putting vinegar in there, which is fine. But we could have put a little bit more in there throughout the 3-hour process. But since we didn't, we had hard water buildup on our jars. Not a big deal. We're going to wash them, and we'll use a little barkeeper's friend and a sponge, and we'll scrub it off. And, of course, it'll be washed and cleaned and be ready to go again. This is really nothing to, and even if you had it on your jars where you can't wash them, if you had the buildup on these jars, they're still good to store, still good to use. You just wash it after next time you want to fill it. You just wash your jars with a little bit of barkeeper's friend, and that's what we use. So, all right. Thank you for spending time with us today.